Greetings companies, greetings exporters, trade and business experts. Welcome everybody, great to see you all today. Delighted to be here today to talk about creating great content for localized websites and sharing some of our experiences with you. All about doing business in the digital age. So we appreciate that you've all logged on today and taken the time to join us as we look at some of the ways that we can help navigate this so-called new normal of business development and what role content plays in that. Just while the last of you are logging on and signing up, I see some of you are coming just online now. A couple words quick on housekeeping. So today's webinar is 45 minutes long. So we've left some time at the end for Q&A. And we'd really appreciate your questions and your comments and things. Just drop them into that little chat box, and we've got someone curating the questions in the background, and we'll get back to your questions at the end of the webinar. Then, we look forward to all of your questions. There will also be 3 polls during the webinar. So we're going to launch 3 polls. We would love your participation. So grab your mouses, and click on whatever response it is that is most appropriate for you at the time. Then we will also have a survey, very brief survey, 2 minutes, not even 1 minute survey at the close of this webinar. And again, we would really appreciate your participation. It helps us organize and focus and respond to things that suit you. So without further ado, I think we should probably introduce ourselves. So my name is Susanna Hardy. If I can get my mouse to work, I will change slides. And introduce also my 2 colleagues. So I am Chief Content Officer at IBT Online. I'm delighted to be here with you. And I'm also very delighted that my 2 colleagues have joined me today. So Samantha Safici, Senior Business Development Manager at IBT Online. And Samantha is based in Florida, has a lot of knowledge on the international scene, but also on content and on finding solutions and online solutions for businesses looking to grow internationally. And Joelle Lazarotto is our Senior Marketing Manager, heads up the marketing team, the online marketing team here at IBT Online. And I've asked Joelle to step in and give us some serious know-how, experience, and sort of how-tos of her wisdom on online marketing, and particularly on the content that you need for effective online marketing in today's world. Very brief word just on the company we work for. IBT Online stands for International Business Technology Online. We've been around for quite a long time, since 2002. And I guess our unique selling point is really that we are 100% focused on providing online solutions for companies to grow. That is essentially website build, website management, and online marketing for companies. And exploring the globe and getting companies to reach further is really our goal for that. We're a US company. We have offices though in other places too. I'm actually sitting at home in the UK. We're sort of semi lockdown still, a little bit on, but my colleagues join me online as well. So with that, let's start the show, as it were. We are decided to split things today into 6 sections, try and really focus in. First, just a general introduction about what we're talking about, this global digital age. What does that mean for us, and where does content play in that? And then we thought we'd really drill down into this notion of a buyer persona and the buyer's journey, which is so important for you all to understand as we're going along in this online world, what that means both for your websites and for your online marketing, and how that affects your international journey. Then section 3 is about some of our top tips for content creation. Then Joel will be talking about strategy, mapping, and repurposing for content. Samantha's going to be talking about some of the online global programs that we run, and then we're going to go for takeaways, Q&A, and as I said, drop your Q&A, drop your questions anyway into the chat box. We also wanted to say this webinar is recorded, so you don't even have to take notes. You'll get a recording on Friday, so you can sit back, relax, enjoy it, understand it, get engaged with it, as it were. There's a lot of content. We've put an awful lot into this webinar. And in fact, we think we might have to do a second webinar at some point, just as there's just so much to talk about. So we hope that we've left it in a very pragmatic, helpful way for you today to get the most out of this for that. So just starting then on content for the digital age, let's just define what we mean by this digital age. What is this digital age anyway? I mean, to say that the internet is a crowded space, it's like saying there's stars in the sky, you know, it's a very crowded space. So 60% of the world today is basically online. And when we say online, the average time spent per day, 6 hours and 43 minutes per day online. So it really is a vast amount of our time, of our waking and working world. And the pandemic has driven those numbers further. It was already growing before the pandemic, growing at sort of a good rate. I mean, the number of internet users grew last year, in 2019, grew by 7%. That's nearly 300 million people in 1 year. So, you know, it's really still a very, you know, it's not at all a mature yet business. And it has, as I said, the pandemic has really sort of pushed us all even more into the online world. One of the main things we're all doing is communicating. I said sort of nearly 5 billion people are online, nearly 4 billion are on social media. If you are a small, mid-cap, medium-sized company, this is good news for you. You know exactly where your prospects are, where your customers are, where your future employees are, your future distributors. They're all online. And you know how to reach them. You can reach them through social media and online media and online marketing. So I guess for us, this the current situation really has pushed us all more and more into this online world, and we are really feeling that these online business development tools are really a fantastic way to make sure that you're ready for the rebound, that you're not disappearing from the radar screen, as it were. So they're basically, when it comes down to it, when we talk about these online business development tools, we're basically really only talking about the two core ones, the two major ones, your website and online marketing. Your website takes all forms and shapes and sizes. It can have lots of bells and whistles and be e-commerce enabled with secure zones, digital payment loans, all kinds of gateways on it. Or it can be like an online brochure and very still and static. They really range in size and shape and form for all kinds. They have different ambitions: business to business, business to consumer, business to government. You know, all different types. Online marketing is essentially two types. We talked about search engine marketing and social media marketing. Again, both ones, in both cases, the content varies and becomes, you know, really important that you're managing all of those aspects of your content. And let's just summarize in one slide. Why is content important? You know, and I was asked this, and it actually took me aback, and I said, why is it important? It's important because it's the fundamental reason why people visit your website. You might have a wonderful design. You might have the best logo around. You've spent hours choosing the right colors, but people visit your website and they read about your blog and they engage with you because of content. Content is the way that you generate leads, that you persuade potential customers to actually take action, become customers. It's the way that you drive, or not drive, that sounds too fierce, but that you lead prospects down a sales funnel. And we'll be talking more about that throughout this webinar, defining both buyer personas and their journeys. So why is content important? It's important because it's fundamentally the way and the reason. It's the why of the outreach and of the engagement that you have online. So in a nutshell, just trying to summarize on one slide, this first section, why do companies need great online content? You need great online content online because the world is online. And this means that all of your interactory stakeholders, prospects, suppliers, all of them will be looking around for you online and engaging with you online. And that the best way of engaging with your business partners is effective online business development tools, your website and your online marketing. So that's the sort of the core of that first part. Now let's talk a little bit more about the buyer and the buyer's journey. We mentioned that the online world is competitive, it's large, and it's ubiquitous and invasive. 7 hours a day, nearly online, is the average. But there's one other characteristic. Anything online is customer-centric, searcher-centric. Everything online, your website, your media, everything is designed to have the searcher at the heart of it. So you might say, well, we've got the best we've got the best product ever. Surely people will find us. We're so good. People will find us. It doesn't work that way anymore. The customer is at the center, and you have to, if you're in charge of sales and marketing, it's your job to try and influence all those little black arrows that go between customer to customer, customer supplier, customer competitor, and raise the flag above the parapet and say, we exist too, and we're great too, and we have real solutions for you, customer, potential customer. So remember this notion of customer-centric or client-centric or searcher-centric. Remember that it's not you, the company, in the middle. It's the consumer, the customer, the client. And this will permeate everything you do in online, and particularly for content. Let's dig down one layer deeper and say, why is this so, and how is it built into the internet? And a question we regularly get from prospects from us is, well, if I want to go internationally, why can't I just use my US website or my UK website, Australian website, whatever it is? I want to reach out internationally. I've just spent a lot of money on my home website. Why can't I use that? It's because of this customer-centric feature. Search engines are designed to put the searcher at the center. What this means is that Google, for example, is a search engine, and there are lots of different search engines. Take Google, but they're all the same. Google is in the US is not the same as Google UK, is not the same as Google Australia. Google Argentina is in Spanish. Google Mexico is in Mexican Spanish, which is different from Argentinian Spanish. Think of Google as 192 different Googles, because that's how many countries they're in. So search engines are localized. And that's what I mean by this feature of localized. It means it puts the customer at the center. I'm going to use some examples of that. Here's an example of a .au website. This is an Australian website. So this is an Australian website. They've been going for a couple of years now. They're well established in Australia, or they're well established, I'm sorry, in the United States. They've built an Australian website. It's been going for a couple of years, and it's in English. And it's not that different from the American website, but it is localized. It has a .au, not a .com. It's hosted nearby Australia, so that Google recognizes it as an Australian relevant website, so that you can see that, for example, the biggest traffic by far, 90% of the traffic comes from Australia. And after that, the next one is New Zealand. And after that, it tapers down very quickly into other English-speaking nations, the US, UK, India, Canada, Philippines. But, Google says this is an Australian site that is relevant for Australia. And therefore, we're going to make this, it's in English, all that, but it's localized for Australia. So just on one slide, because this is not about localization, this is about content, but just it's important to understand this notion of localization. Here's a slide that I think many of you will know because you've been on our webinars before, but on one slide, here are the 10 criteria that we use to define a localized website or a localized social media. So it's not about translation. It's about technical aspects, regulatory aspects, content management systems, hosting, all kinds of things go into making something localized. So getting back to content, for us, your very first step, the first thing you really want to do is maybe make sure that you have a localized website. So the first step to go into internationally and into hitting any market is to have a localized website. And that allows you to be found and to be understood, do business locally. It's the platform that you're going to base all of your content on. Any of your online marketing, any of your blogs, any of your social media, anything that you put out there is going to be based and bouncing off that localized website. It can interact with your home website, and it should, because you want brand consistency. But the important thing as well is to have a dedicated platform for each of your main target markets. I'm going to ask Samantha now to talk us through some of the aspects of that, particularly starting with keywords and then really drilling down into buyer personas. So I'm going to turn over the microphone to Samantha. Samantha, are you there?
Thank you. Yes. So before you get started designing and launching your international marketing, there's that crucial step of keywords, making sure to do your keyword research. Here is a really great example of train in Portuguese. If you are looking to attract people in the Brazilian market, all of your content should have the word trem. However, if you're looking to attract people in the Portuguese market in Portugal, then you should definitely use comboio, because people in Portugal don't search for the word trem. So this is just a quick example of why doing and periodically reviewing your keyword research is key. And this is vital for search advertising. You need to make sure that you're using the same language and the exact language for your target audience and what they're using to search if you want to rank high and if you want to be competitive. But this is also paramount for any content that you create. And with content, I also include social media posts. So it's not just blogs, webinars, landing pages, but it's also the social media posts on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. That short snippet of text that you include is all the audience has to make, has to be able to make a decision, maybe even unconsciously, on whether they will engage with you or not. And as we mentioned before, using native-like language will help build that trust, as your content will feel local, relevant, genuine, and creating a really good local user experience. So another example of why key terms are important and how localization works, especially in content, is this great example about squeakless dog toys. So I have a dog named Zoe who's right next to me, and Susanna has a pup next to her. So we decided to search for squeakless dog toys, me being in Miami, Florida, and Susanna being in London, the United Kingdom. And if you can see, we both got content and we both got products that were very different from one another, because Google recognized where each of us was and gave us relevant information. So for me, I got Chewy, I got Amazon, and then for Susanna, she actually got things like petforums.co.uk that looks kind of like a pet community, yahoonews.uk. So not only specific products, but also some blogs and some information about squeakless dog toys. So that was really interesting. And now going into buyer personas. So why is this all important? Why is it important to know your keywords, aside from helping search engines know? It's also important so that you're creating the right content at the right time for the right people, because you really understand your buyer persona. A buyer persona, as HubSpot defines it, is a fictional representation of your ideal customer based on market research and real data about your existing customers. What's important to know and what's important to keep in mind is that you can and you absolutely should have different buyer personas depending on who your ideal customers are. And this is especially true for international buyer personas, which I'll get into in a second. But just to give you an idea as to what a buyer persona looks like in practice, is this example of Zipcar. So Zipcar is so tuned in as to who their main buyer persona is that they actually put it into their mission statement. So they're looking for people who are urban, educated, tech savvy, and environmentally conscious. And you can absolutely tell that based on this Instagram post, it is spot on for who they're looking for. Not just based on the picture where you can see that they're in an urban environment, that they look environmentally conscious because they're holding plants, but also based on their hashtags. So if you look at their hashtags, they're looking at road trip, they're looking at traveling, adventure, city, modern, urban, back to school, dorm life, so educated, tech savvy. They absolutely know who their target buyer persona is, and that's who they're marketing to. So on the next slide, we talk about defining your buyer persona. If you try to accelerate your sales process without knowing who you're selling to, you might actually be accelerating to a complete dead end. So the first step is to get an idea as to your ideal corporate profile and then your buyer persona. Your buyer persona is not the same as an ideal customer profile, which is a category. You actually need to go deeper into subcategories. So for example, a B2B company in advanced manufacturing, you talk to multiple people. So although the CEO makes the ultimate decision, his decision is based on his conversations with his line-specific engineer, his head of sales and marketing, a research analyst. And each one of those people have their own problems. They have their own goals, their own challenges. So if you're in B2B sales and your ideal customer profile, your ideal customer profile will define which companies are good for your product offering, and then your buyer persona will define the people in those companies who you need to work with. And each buyer persona fits in the ideal customer profile, and each buyer persona will have specific questions, concerns, roles within those customers. And so you don't want to confuse it with a buyer persona. So you have your ideal customer profile, which is large, and then your ideal buyer persona, which are the people within it. And on this slide, just remember, sorry, back one slide. If you just remember that when developing your buyer persona, both internationally and domestically, keep in mind two really important things. So the first thing is that your buyer personas change over time and change circumstances. So COVID-19 could have affected the way that your buyer personas are interacting with you. And also international buyer personas may not be the same. And that actually takes us to our next slide. So diving into international buyer personas. Especially in the times that we're in today, international buyer personas can differ from your domestic persona. On this slide, there's a few questions that you should ask yourself, like, are there multiple buyer personas for my export markets? How do they find me? What do they care about? L'Oreal is frequently cited for how spot on they are with their international online marketing. So if you look at this picture and the text, it's L'Oreal reassuring their US stylists that they're committed to support them while we are socially distancing ourselves and while a lot of stylists and salons are closed. L'Oreal knows that their buyer persona is most likely being affected by the circumstances that we're in. So it's their way of showing support to these stylists and to these small business owners. However, in L'Oreal Australia, the message is completely different. There is no mention of COVID-19, of coronavirus, of socially distancing, but instead it's focused on the climate. And this is probably because of the fires that happened earlier on this year that they suffered. So that's what matters to them. That's what matters to their buyer persona right now. And then in the last example, it's L'Oreal Brazil demonstrating to their Brazilian customers that they're doing their part to help the people of Brazil by producing sanitizer, which is something that they don't typically produce. So as you can see by these three examples, each buyer persona is clearly different and their messaging is respectful of that. So now taking a look at buyer's journey. So once you have an idea as to who you're targeting, who is the ideal customer, where they're getting their information, what their goals are, what their concerns are, then you'll have to take a look at buyer's journey. So the buyer's journey is the active research process someone goes through leading up to a final purchase. It's a fundamental part of the inbound strategy because it's a you can use to understand your buyer's needs and provide the information that they need to reach their goals. So every interaction you have with your persona should be tailored to where they are in their specific buyer's journey. So in the awareness stage, they are trying to identify their problem. Maybe they don't even know that it's a problem that they have yet until they start interacting with your business and seeing your solution. Then it's the consideration stage. So it's understanding what their options are that could solve their problem. So this is where they're doing a lot of research. They're taking a look at you. They're taking a look at your competitors. They're taking a look at other solutions, alternatives. And then there's the decision stage. So comparing their top choices for when they're ready to make a purchase. And in this content creation, in content strategy, this is why content is so important, because you can guide your buyer persona throughout this journey and provide them with the necessary information so that they can make a great decision and hopefully choose you as their provider or as as their manufacturer.
Samantha, thank you so much. That's a whirlwind tour, but an in-depth at the same time. So terrific. Before we jump on some of the online content creation top tips, I wanted to launch a quick poll. So I would appreciate if you could look at that poll and say, if any of this interests you, would you like to learn more about localized websites? Would you like to be contacted regarding localized websites? So those are those websites we talked about at the beginning, which really put the end prospect, client, employee, whatever it is, at the center. Thank you all very much for replying. I'm still collecting responses from some of you, but that's a very encouraging sign for us. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to be closing the poll in just a second, but just to warn you, there will be 2 other polls later on in the webinar as well. Thank you. I'm going to close that poll, but thank you all very much for replying. That's great. And let's move on then and talk a little bit about the IBT Online. How come my mouse doesn't work? IBT Online top tips for online content creation. And again, there's a lot of information packed into this, but you do get a copy of the webinar later on. I think the overall message, if there's one thing to take away from it, is original, engaging content. So content writing, it sounds simple, but it's not actually that simple. So before you think about who it is they're trying to reach, you really need to say, who are my buyer personas? Who am I? What are their pain points? What are the things that I need to be talking about? So who are my primary audience really? For example, let's say you're creating a website for a law firm or for a service company. Your primary audience might be their existing clients. However, your secondary audience is broader as well. So you'll have multiple audience sections on that. And where are they engaging online? How? Which platforms? So all of these things must be really worked out from the very beginning. But there's a couple of basic things that absolutely have to happen. Obviously, it's got to have faultless grammar, faultless spelling, syntax. It's got to be absolutely spot on. You cannot have people associating your brand with something that is sloppy. The next, just as important, is to always make sure that you're absolutely accurate. Name your sources, check your sources, make sure that your sources are correct. Don't get involved in hyperbolic. Who are you linking to in your blogs, in your postings? Making sure that because there's an association that goes with that link, and having lots of link looks good, but make sure that they're the right links. I think most of all, also for me, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's a story that gets told in any content, and the beginning is talking about your client or your buyer persona's challenge. The middle is talking about what possible solutions for that buyer persona there is. And the end is suggesting the next steps for that buyer persona. So note that the buyer persona is at the center of all of that story. So you're not going out there saying, we're a great company, this is what we do. You're saying, we think that you have this challenge at the moment. We understand that challenge. And here's some of the solutions that you could have. And here are some of the next steps to have. So that's the kind of story that we're talking about. Note that when we talk about, original content, there's to the point now where search engines actually penalize websites that have duplicate content or that just take a scrape of a page and post it as a blog. That's actually now, in the past, I think 2 years, certainly not 3 years, actually put negatively by Google. Next on my step really is this sort of inverted pyramid approach, as it's called. I've rather mixed my metaphors, and this really comes also from playing cards with my mom, who always said, lead with your aces. And I never really understood what she meant, but until I saw these upside down pyramids. And what she really meant was, don't hide things that are absolutely vital. Apparently the average person spends you have about 8 seconds or 2 seconds, depending on who you read, to actually snap and engage with your potential audience. So you really need to make sure that the vital information is up there posted first. And then, drill down, that after that becomes, the important stuff, and then sort of nice to know information. And the nice to know could even lead to, look, if you're interested in getting more information, click this, and we'll go from there. So keep in mind this inverted pyramid and leading with your aces when you're writing anything online. It's not a college or an educated, a scholastic essay. It's not a pedagogic doctorate thesis. It's information that you're passing. And so the vital comes to the top. Now, the third rule really is to keep it simple. Keep it as simple as possible. As a rule of thumb, one sentence is a maximum of 35 words. Don't be scared of paragraphs that are 2 sentences long. That's fine. Don't be scared of really short sentences. Use them. Do not use or avoid at all costs adverbs and adjectives. They muddy the water. Try and keep your language simple, direct, and concise. So if you're looking at words like, sumakaram, well, no, just say the word image. And also use active verbs, not passive verbs. The example I have below you is about squeakless toys, again, squeakless dog toys. So on the left-hand side, you could say, well, we made this, and you're starting with the we. No, start with the you. Start with your buyer persona. Don't start with you, the company. Start with your buyer persona. But here in this case, the bad example is, we made the squeakless buddy dog chewy toy from 100% natural, blah, 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 blah. By then, I've turned off completely. In one short sentence, you have some essential information for your buyer persona, which puts your buyer persona's challenge and difficulty at the forefront of that sentence. If they want to know more, like what it's made out of, or does it bounce, or does it rip, they'll read on. That's that little squeakless toy, dog toy example. The next rule that we have is, that keep it simple. We often do things called word clouds. Some of you might know this already. This is really when you're trying to sort of build up words that you keep and say, where are we getting this vocabulary from? Are we using the right terms? And so in a word cloud, the words you have for search engine optimization should appear several times. It should pop. And you should be able to see them very well. So for example, for us, it's online business, it's trade, digital events, blah, blah, blah. So those are what's popping up in that word cloud. Non-keywords, the keywords that don't affect your ranking, they can, should be varied. Again, you don't want duplication, avoid the repetition. And then the third message is take a screenshot or take an Excel spreadsheet and make sure that you're using the same terms across all your media. So if your product is called one thing, keep the same term. whether it's on Facebook, on a WeChat, on a website. It has to be the same term. That's important for your brand consistency, for your SEO, and for your image on the web. The next point I wanted to really mention was, are you able to skim the text? Now this is sort of an interesting thought, but the attention span of your readers can be very short. They are scanning, your buyer personas are looking for information. That's why you go to the web. You go online to look for information. You're skimming stuff. How long does your eye rest on the text? About 2 seconds. So make sure that the information you have on that inverted pyramid can actually be skimmed by the eye. So great to use headings, heading 1, heading 2, heading 3 for the detail, and divide those sections up into bites that are clearly legible, clearly readable, clearly skimmable, and readable. So, for example, with these descriptive subheaders that I've got, what is climate change? What are the drivers? The current and projected impacts, solutions, very more. So those are the different subheadings that you can have to highlight your text to make sure that people are scanning it well. The next point that we have really is, we talked about how fast people look at things, how fast people skim things. Show, don't tell. There's some crazy statistic that the brain processes an image about 60,000 times faster than it does a word. And an image can really be very evocative of even complex ideas and complex things. So, use imagery as much as possible. These days, it is within everybody's reach, or should be in everybody's reach, to do infographics, videos, drawings, charts, graphs, everything. And what's really great about that as a medium is that they do so well internationally. You can reuse, repurpose the same image. Changing the subtitles allows you to repurpose videos. Changing a small amount of text can change the infographic. And on the example on the right, well, that is, you can use that in any language. It's all about URLs, so it can be anywhere. So these are images that can be repurposed well, and we're going to get onto repurposing in a moment. What I wanted to say here was this notion of driving your buyer persona throughout your website. And those are hyperlinks within your website from one content piece to another. And this allows your buyer persona to move through your website, move through the buyer's journey, through the sales funnel that you're trying to get them through. And so you can have content which is appropriate for one part, and then you say, okay, if you want to drill down more or see it a different way, click another thing and you can find out, or go to another part, and there you'll have a different way of looking at the same thing. So you go, you want to learn more about that, come and join a webinar, for example, for that. And when we talk about calls to action, it's important to vary them and to make sure that where does your content lead. So what does your content do in the long term? Your content leads to a place. It leads to a next step. It doesn't just leave the person hanging there at the end of the sentence. So at the end of your content, blog, website, whatever it is, you're moving your buyer persona through the buyer journey, through the sales funnel, through these things called calls to action, CTAs. Vary them. Make sure that they are there throughout your website in different ways. This is the same blog that has done about 3 or 4 different types of calls to action and of downloads, and each one allows you, the company, to engage with your prospect in a different way, and engage with them in the way that they want to be talked to. So you could have 6 free blog post templates. You could save time. So these are all different ways of saying the same thing, but throughout the one blog, different ways of engaging with that one buyer persona that has actually stepped on and engaged with the blog. So if you get your prospect to actually start reading your content, make sure that there's always the next step. Where do you want that buyer persona to go after reading that blog? And what do you want them to do next is the key. So I guess like everything online, that's the great thing about online is the amount of data that you can get. And that allows you always to look at your return on investment, make sure that you have doing the right content for the right format. The first, obviously, is to define your goal, choose your metrics then also, analyze and learn. There are lots of different KPIs. We've had a whole webinar just on these sort of things. So, we can drill down at a later stage on this if there's questions, but I think the most important is just to have a notion of the fact that you need to measure your return on investment at all steps to make sure that you're right on track. And with that, I'm going to pass the mic over to Joelle to talk about content strategy, mapping, and repurposing. Joelle.
That's great. Thank you very much, Susanna. Perfect. So before we dive deep into content itself, I just wanted to share and get us thinking about when designing your marketing strategy as a whole. So it's important to always make sure that you are aligned with your overall business strategy. So this will then give you a good starting point to decide what you want to achieve, and consequently also how you're going to monitor this and what metrics should you use and should you focus on. So this is just an example to say that if we take social media here, you see how within a singular platform, let's say Facebook as the example we have here, you can already see how much you can tailor your activities to the goal and the overall objectives of your business. So depending on what you're selling, on what your services, what services you're providing, it may be time to relook at your business strategy, your goals and your KPIs. But this is just to introduce us to the topic and on to the next slide. To me, this just goes, the same goes for your content. So when you start looking at your content strategy, content creation without a strategy really leads to content that is disjointed and lacks purpose. So content is a little bit like a jigsaw puzzle. Every piece of content created is like a piece that builds your long-term strategy. So as we've seen, we talked about buyer persona, we talked about how content can help them navigate through the buyer's journey and the different stages of this buyer journey. So your content should be able to lead visitors and prospects down that sales funnel. And so your website should have this variety of content, really addressing different questions, bringing them from the awareness stage to a consideration stage, and then leading them to that final decision stage. So when you're looking at your content strategy, the main things to start thinking about is defining the purpose of the content that you're creating, identifying a long-term content plan that would then account for different media, but also your different buyer personas. Create search engine friendly content. So we all strive to get more organic traffic, and having new updated SEO friendly content is a fantastic way of doing that. And we know that if someone finds you organically, they're going to spend the time reading your blog, looking your infographic or watching your video. And that's why that keyword research as well that Samantha mentioned earlier is so important for content creation. But also we'll be looking in this section a little bit more about repurposing your content in a way that will help you increase your chances of being found on the relevant search engines, promote your content, get it out there, get in front of the people that need it most and are likely to find it helpful, valuable and engage with it. But also understand how to analyze and measure your effectiveness so you can really see what's working and what needs working on. So on the next slide, different topics work for the 3 different stages of the customer journey, and we'll get into that in a bit more detail. But I just wanted to show here that the type of content that you share is also very important, and this is usually referred to as content mapping. So before getting into that, I just wanted to show a practical example of what can be considered to be a good versus not so good content mapping. So here, for example, we have the 3 stages: awareness, consideration and decision. Good content example would be in the awareness stage, as Samantha mentioned, they might not even know what problem they're trying to solve. They might just be interested in the topic. So keep it general. If you start promoting, for example, a product or service too early, people will not know what they're looking for. People will not know what you should be the provider of choice. So mapping your content to the buyer's journey and the stage your buyer persona is in is ever so important. So diving into content mapping in a little bit more detail onto the next slide. as I mentioned, you should always map your content to your buyer's journey. So your content should lead your visitors through this journey, helping them make the decision, helping them find out a little bit more about the issue they're facing, the solution you provide, and why they should choose you as a provider of choice. So with a solid strategy, each piece of content on your website will have the specific purpose for that specific target audience, or your buyer persona, as we call it. So we know that people use the internet to conduct research, discover information on a variety of topics. So be sure to use your website and its content as an opportunity to really educate prospects about trends, common question in the industry. And then for those that have engaged with that content, they've learned a little bit more, then you can further down the funnel, help them understand a little bit more about your company, your products, your services, how this would work, and why this is good to solve that problem that we're researching initially. So another example that I'd like to think about is, for example, an audience of job seekers. They are researching companies where they would like to work. So a career section with insight into not just the job that you're offering, but the company culture, who they'll be working with, what you value, what kind of values they will be buying into, will be very relevant to them. So this is content we'll be likely to engage with, and they'll be likely to then go and call into the call to action that Susanna was mentioning, helping them take the next stage into that buyer journey that is so important to lead them through that sales funnel. So on the next slide, I just wanted to review, we mentioned it's not just your buyer persona, it's not just the content of your content in the sense, what you write about, but what format does that take? So we know that in the awareness stage, as we said, we'll be looking at providing educational, informational content. So anything that is a blog article, a white paper, a free guide, top tips, an infographic, free webinars, anything that would get your audience thinking about that product and thinking about what solution they might need to solve that issue. And when they go down to the consideration stage, here is the right time to share some case studies, some specific product information, spec sheets, a catalog, again, guiding them through and showing them how you can solve that problem they researched at the beginning. And once you've taken them down to the decision stage, here is the time to share demos, free trials, and quotes. And yes, these are all pieces of content, so you need to think carefully about what you include and what format that quote is shared with, and who you share that with in terms of your buyer persona within the right buyer's journey. So as we say, the right content at the right time to the right people. So once you've mapped your content, you've got your buyer persona, you know what your strategy is for your content, you've mapped the content you have to your buyer's journey, then how do you use? So you have your content, you know what you want to do with it. How do you put it in front of people? How do you use it? I find, and we always recommend having a content calendar, so planning ahead. And this could be really looking at the year ahead, the next quarter, the next month, whatever timeline suits your business model or your sales cycle. This will help you structure your thoughts and make sure that delivery of your content strategy is coherent with a buyer's journey and the expectations of your prospects. So when organizing a content calendar for an international audience, there are a couple of maybe extra questions you need to ask yourself. So what platforms are my audience using? Who am I trying to reach with this specific post and piece of content? What exactly do I want them to do next? So after you've gone through your buyer persona identification, you've got your content, then here I can hear some of you asking, so I've got the content, I've got the calendar. Do I need to do this for each of my international markets on top of my local or my domestic market? Do we need to create new content for each of these markets? And here we really do all leads into content repurposing and how to use your existing content. So the good news is that if you have great content that you already created for your domestic website, for your domestic buyer persona, there might be light at the end of the tunnel. You might have done a big chunk of the work, but there is a little bit more work that needs to be done. So repurposing content is a very effective way to make sure that all of the pieces that work, all of the content that you see very successfully work in your domestic market you've created can then be reused and reshared and made the most of. But so there are a couple of types of repurposing. In this example, we have a blog that was originally written for a US-based awareness stage, the top of the funnel buyer persona. What happened here is that we've identified which markets and which specific international buyer would be attracted to this kind of blog, would find that interesting. So we've taken the content, we've localized it, and then we have reshared it and repurposed it for social media. And that goes for that, what I was saying. Here you go, localized content on your site, ready to be shared, ready to be added to your content calendar. Put it out there, get people interacting, get people sharing, and really promote it and put it out there. Another kind of repurposing, is localizing your content. Always keep your local user in mind. So here we have an example of the same blog as I mentioned was taken from a US website, localized for an Australian audience. And we've seen, what about, European audience would react very well to this as well. So we've done, again, a new keyword research, localizing this. I know everything is in English, and I can hear some of you asking, well, why can I not just use the same blog I had on the US for Australia and Europe? Well, English is not the same across the world. Unfortunately, keyword research will allow you to really be found on search engine across the world. But here, another thing that I just wanted to point out is how timing is important. We talked about the right content to the right people at the right time. So we knew that when we initially posted this in August, in Europe, so peak summer or whatever summer we get here in the UK really, but we knew that this would really resonate well with our audiences. But if we were to post this blog at the same time in Australia in the middle of the winter, this would have not been very well received and it would have looked a little bit odd. So what we did is to keep in mind the timing, what our buyer persona are thinking about, what's relevant to them, and we then waited until January to post and promote this blog in Australia, really making sure that it was the right time for our users over there as well. So the third example of how this blog can be used then is when we take it from an English language blog and we have then localized it for a Latin American audience. So again, keyword research, localized and translated into Spanish, and promoted with them with very good results. So that's a third way of using, again, same blog repurposed across a number of markets, just making sure that you are careful with a few details. And the last example I just wanted to share with you in terms of content repurposing. Here we'll be looking at how we can use, we have one topic, in this case, social media Mexico, but this has been then moved. We have a blog, which has then been repurposed into an infographic. And this, really allows us to make sure that on certain platform, we know that our audience engages really well with infographics on social media, like Twitter, because it is a bit more visual. And then people that want to go and read the full blog, they can find that on our website. So really this allows us to cater for different audiences that are interested in the same topic, but they might like to receive the content on a different platform in a different format. So just a quick example again, I mentioned earlier for your international audience, when talking about content mapping, content calendar repurposing, one of the important things to consider is where is your international audience doing the research? Where are they active? Where are they ready to engage? And from there, what kind of format would your content perform best on these platforms? So in this case, not only you have to understand the country, but also the platform. And I just picked Facebook because really this is the obvious first choice for many marketers, both domestically and internationally, across B2C and B2B markets. So Facebook is, as you can see here, available in 100 and odd languages. People spend an average of 35 minutes a day, which I think is fairly low. It's probably more than that really these days. But it has a huge audience of over 2 billion people, making potential customers all over the world a lot easier to reach. And by putting your content out there, that gives it a huge visibility and, huge opportunities to then start that conversation, start that engagement through the buyer's journey. So a quick example, so using Facebook again here is just to show how important it is to fully understand what your buyer persona, who your buyer persona is, how do they engage, and what their journey looks like in each of your target markets. So this is an example from a campaign that we run for one of our clients where we were promoting the same content. So this was a blog with similar imagery and messages, although of course localized and staying relevant to our local audience as we've seen before. If we look at the results on the right-hand side here for this specific post, we can see for the UK, we've had just over 1,200 engagements, and we were super pleased with that. But then you look at Mexico and their engagement, well, 20,400 odd. So if we stopped our analysis at this, we could quite easily infer that our campaign in Mexico worked much better, right? Not necessarily. So if we look at the full buyer's journey, here we can get a real picture. So you need to know each market specifically, how they react and how they engage with your content. So then you can look at the numbers in several ways. So for Mexico, for example, we know that the market engages very easily. They're incredibly reactive and responsive, unlike maybe the frostier Brits here. But if you look at the actual conversion, which really is the important bit for companies, as this indicates how many actually went out and bought the product or asked for a quote, the numbers are pretty similar. So we know from experience that you need to get those levels of engagement in Mexico to get a good level of conversion or sales. Whereas in the UK, less engagement with your content doesn't necessarily mean lower sales. So in this case, each market is specific, and you really need to take all of this into account when designing your content strategy.
Joelle, thank you so much. I'm aware of time ticking past. I'm going to launch a quick poll, therefore. Then I think, and we would love if you could just answer this quick poll. Just if you have an interest in online marketing, if you would like us to get in touch with you about online marketing and figure out some strategies for you and look at your different markets, we'd be happy to do so. And again, thank you very much for those responses. We're getting a lot of responses through. Right, I'm going to be closing this poll, and I think I'm going to pass directly to Samantha. So I'm going to close that poll, and then move along. We have the IBT Online Global Programs. These are programs that help companies that we've set up with various U.S. states, and I think we're looking to see some of them, but I think we're given time, go straight on to what the programs actually mean in terms of where you can access information about them and what they do. Samantha, would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So real quick, we do have online global available all over the US, but there are STEP grants available specific for website localization and for international online marketing in the highlighted states that you see there. So if your state is highlighted in orange, there are STEP grants available, so ranging from $6,000 to $12,000 to use towards website localization and international online marketing. And depending on what your goals are for your specific international target markets, we can help you do various things. We can help you reach new markets, support your distributors, support your partners. If you're B2B, if you're B2C, we can help you reach your target clients, grow that brand awareness. And the way that we do this is through our online global programs. So starting with options A and B, options A and B have to do with website development. So the development of localized websites in your top target markets. Our starter program is the 2-market expansion, where by the end of it, you'll have 2 websites for your top 2 target markets. So for example, one in Spanish for Mexico, and then one in German for Germany, for example. Then option B, if you're looking at expanding into multiple markets, so more than just 2, or maybe you just want a larger scope of work, because option A is a specific scope of work, so 12 pages and 2,000 words for each site. If you're looking at something much larger, we can take a look at option B for you. And then once your websites are up and live and running, we do have option C, which is international online marketing. So all of that content strategy that we were talking about throughout this webinar about blogs and keeping your website updated, doing the social media marketing. That's what option C is for. So that's monthly ongoing support for your international target markets. And then option E is available for companies that participate in e-commerce, whether you're B2B or B2C. We can create and maintain your individual e-commerce websites that are in best practice for your top target markets. So those are our main programs. And if you want more information, you can go on our website, click on your appropriate state, and you'll have everything there from the scope of work to the budget to grant information. And if you have any specific questions, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you, Samantha.
Right. Over to you.
I'm going to launch the last poll. Just I see that we have quite a few questions coming in though as well. There's quite a few on the actual online programs, and I think we'll get to those as well about how to access them as well. But if you'd like this poll, please. Would you like us to contact regarding the online global programs? Let us know, and we can kind of direct you, or give you more information, or show you where you can get information, both about STEP grants and how the programs work, and how to access them. And again, I would really appreciate. Thank you all very much for that big response. There's a lot of response there. Thank you all very much. Right, getting down now to the wire. We said we'd keep this under an hour, and I think we're just over. I apologize about that. We have some takeaways and the Q&A, just lining up some of the questions that we have. In terms of our takeaways, really, what we're looking at is just sort of, a reminder how much the world is online and how important, especially in this new normal, it is to be online. Secondly, that the online world is a localized world. So you need to have this notion of localization if you want to grow beyond your smallest border. So you really need to have this notion of localization for content. And a couple of best practices that we've summarized from our webinar today in terms of best practice for great content: have the localized website tagged as a platform, know your buyer persona, define and know your keywords, generate original, engaging content that is relevant to your buyer persona, set goals and measure them. Right, and then I guess our big message as well is it's still a strange world out there at the moment. It's starting to become a new normal, I guess, but it's still a strange place, and we wish you all the best. And we have a lot of questions that have come in, and we'll answer those. We'll spend a few minutes answering that, and if we don't get to your question, we will email you separately with responses. So, Joelle, have you been creating questions?
Hi, Susanna. Absolutely. As I say, we've had a few coming in, so I've been trying to group them to try and make sure that within the few minutes we have, we'll try and touch upon as many as possible. So maybe Samantha, can I hand this over to you? Do distributors play a role in the content or choice of one material to market internationally?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you have a really great relationship with your distributors or your partners internationally, we absolutely welcome that they help you write content. They are always in direct contact with your buyers in those specific countries. So they know them, they know your buyer persona, they know who they're interacting with, and they know what they need for their specific stages. So we always encourage you to work with your distributors if you have a great relationship with them.
Excellent, thank you. Susanna, how often do you have to look at your keywords?
Well, how long is a piece of thread? If we had endless resources, you would be looking at your keywords all the time. But in between all the time and never, there's a happy balance. Regularly, let's say a minimum twice a year, a minimum. But it's best to have an Excel spreadsheet that you're refreshing regularly, and certainly if you have any kind of new major event, new product launch or anything like that, definitely look at the keywords. But I'd say minimum twice a year would be sufficient.
Excellent. We've had a couple of tough questions in, and maybe I'll take the next one on myself, but how often should we be creating new content? That, again, is a difficult one to answer because it really depends. It depends on your marketing strategy, it depends on your resources. What we can say is that try not to overstretch. You don't need to publish a new blog every week. You don't need to be on all of the social media platforms internationally. But also don't create content in a vacuum. Don't just rush it because you feel that you need to create some content. Use what you have. You know, one of the worst things is to go on someone's website and you see the latest blog they published was in 2017. Relook at your content, repurpose, republish. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be new content all the time. Use your resources efficiently, and again, create new content from what you already have. And maybe one more if you squeeze in, Samantha, come back to you. Can IBD help me create original content if we do work with you on one of those programs?
Yeah, absolutely. So IBT Online can help with your social media posts. They can help write blogs. So yes, we absolutely can help you create content in your international markets.
I'm going to jump in here just to say thank you all to my two colleagues, Samantha and Joelle, who did a fantastic job. Thank you all so much. We have our next webinars are coming up. We'll be looking at Canada, selling online in Canada and selling online in Mexico. I've dropped 2 handouts here that you can take if you want them in the webinar. There's a handout, an infographic on the online environment in Canada and online environment in Mexico, both available to you. And finally, there's a survey at the end of this. Please take it if you have a moment. We've enjoyed being here today. We've enjoyed your questions. We will get back to you because there's a lot we haven't answered. We've overstepped our time. Thank you so much. Happy trading, happy business, happy continuation. And thank you again to my colleagues, and thank you all for being here. Thanks and bye-bye. See you at the next webinar. Thank you. Bye-bye.